I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I was raised to hip-hop parents. Both my mother and my father were both rappers. I was involved in street life and gangs growing up just because I was a product of my environment. These are the things that I saw growing up. I said, there's no way I'm going back to this life.
This is a story of Nissim Black.
My kids weren't being led into school because they were black, and I'm in Israel. We were feeling very, very dejected. At the time, I went to Rav Chaim. This is the famous story of me going to Rav Chaim, him saying that your color is your Maila, not your Chisaron. That became public news. I got called by the radio unannounced after this. This is what happened, which I'm putting it out there. But I always said that if he asked me, what am I doing for Black Lives Matter, I would tell him I'm living a black life that matters.
Happy Hanukkah, everybody. It's Aryeh, and I'm very excited to share with you this week's episode of Jewish and Joyful with Nissim Black. We're now in Chodesh Kislev, the month of Kislev, which is the month of Nissim, the month of miracles. And I think it's apropos. I think it's very appropriate to have Nissim in the month of Nissim. I'm really excited to have Nissim on here. Nissim has an incredible story. He grew up in Seattle, Washington, and he had a very, very difficult upbringing, difficult life. He has an incredible story of how he became Jewish and why he became Jewish. And some crazy encounters, including an encounter with Rav Chaim Kanievsky, where he talked about his color, because he had trouble getting his kids into school because of their color. He went to Rav Chaim Kanievsky, and Rav Chaim Kanievsky told him something remarkable. Stay tuned to hear what he said. I'd like to thank everyone for making this possible. A big thank you to Aaron Fogelson. Thank you for all your help. And a big thank you to Yechiel, of course, for everything you do. Later in this episode, we're going to talk about the inspiration that's changing thousands of Shabbos tables around the world. Also, we're going to talk about Aryeh Mishnah Berurah, the incredible life-changing Mishnah Berurah that's changing the way thousands of people are learning Mishnah Berurah. So we're going to talk about later in the episode. We have some incredible surprises coming up, so stay tuned to the end to hear our special announcements. To sponsor an episode, please call 646-397-2320. And this episode should be a schusar fushlema for Eliezer Yehuda Badvar Magachaya. Please share this with friends and family if you get inspiration from it. Please follow and subscribe. We're available on all main streaming platforms, including Torah Anytime. So please follow, subscribe, and spread the words. Enjoy this episode and have a happy Hanukkah. Nissim, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Aryeh.
So can you just take us back to your upbringing, to your childhood, tell us where you grew up?
So I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I was raised to hip-hop parents. Both my mother and my father were both rappers. They actually pioneered hip-hop in Seattle, so they were the first ones on it, and that's been confirmed with anybody else who was doing it at that time and during that era. So I grew up with that. In addition to that, they were also both drug dealers as kids. I grew up, I always say, like any good Jewish boy, joined the family business very early. So I was involved in street life and gangs growing up, just because I was a product of my environment. These are the things that I saw growing up. My first introduction to religion was Islam. My grandfather came to live with us. I was about 8 or 9 years old at that time. He introduced me to Islam. I prayed with him 5 times a day. He would take me to the mosque, and I would pray over there. And that was my introduction, at least, to religion. Now, up until that point in my life, I hadn't thought so much about religion as much as I thought about God. I was always a very, very spiritual kid. For whatever reason, the world in which I lived in wasn't necessarily conducive to that, but that was definitely a big goal of mine as I got older, to get to know more and more about the creator, God, whoever that was. So when I was 13 years old, I had this major surge. And 13 was an interesting age for me because I was going through a lot of chemical imbalances, just like everybody's 13-year-old. And what was happening at that time was I recorded my first professional record. I became I would say a normal, I became a part of this hip hop program that was at this Christian after school center or whatever. So I was exposed at that point to Christianity in a much more serious way, more than when I was like a kid and going to church every once in a while with an aunt or uncle. So that was very much so, eye-opening for me, being able to see different life experiences. And also at 13, I was like already expelled from the school district, running with gangs and smoking pot every day. Like,
How old were you when you first started using drugs?
I was 9. I was 9 years old. So I was 9 years old, which I don't think that was too young. There was other guys that started at 8.
So when you grew up, you had a very, let's just say, challenging type of upbringing. Very different than your standard Jew on the street, right? So now these days you have to do chinuch, you have to educate your own children. Would you say it's easier for you now after you saw what not to do? Or is it harder for you because you didn't have the best upbringing yourself?
I would definitely say it's easier in one aspect. The easiest part is because you just have a blueprint of what not to do, right? It's much easier for you to see something. I mean, like, this is something I don't want my kids exposed to, like, ever. So my kids almost know nothing about anything that we grew up with. I mean, most of the stuff that they hear from other people's kids who've heard my story or something like that. But my kids don't actually know almost anything about the way that I grew up. And so to some degree, it's easier. We moved thousands and thousands of miles from where, I grew up, so that makes it easier. The part that makes it much more difficult is when you don't have positive examples of that going forward. I don't have nothing to look back onto, right? So, when I was a kid, when I brought home, and this shouldn't happen to me, but when I brought home bad report cards, I took a beating like somebody off the street. You know what I'm saying? At least my parents cared. There was a lot of other people that didn't care, but that was like, that's not the way I handle my kids. So, so there's certain things that you don't have a good example of, so that would make it more challenging. But overall, I would say that it's a little bit easier because the due diligence to try to find God in a very, very um uh you know harsh environment that was not conducive to that, that's something that gives you the certain type of strength. You have a certain type of pride that you want to give over to the children. So most definitely.
Wow. So okay. So how do you get into Judaism? First, you were Christian, then Muslim. Now we could see you're Jewish. How do you get here?
So what happened was, first is Christianity. So Christianity came at a pivotal point, and this is usually the way that Christianity works. Not a knock on it, but it just is the way that it usually works. Most people convert, and I think Rabbi Tovi Singer spoke about this one time, several times maybe. That Christianity usually works when people are at their lowest point. At the point that I came to Christianity, I was running with gangs. I was getting into a lot of trouble at that time. I'd already been shot at that point. I was expelled from the school district. And these people literally saved my life. Being there every single day gave me a safe haven, a place to be, place to eat, place to, not that I needed food outside the house, but it was a place where I could get comfort, and there were people that were around there for me. So came at a pivotal point in my life. And so by 14 officially, I actually converted to Christianity. Prior to that point, I would have probably said I was a Muslim. And so by the time I was in high school, I sort of been up and down in my emotions, but I was a Christian, pretty devout, maybe the first 2 years of high school. By the time I was 11th grade year, I got an offer from a major record label. They wanted gangster rap. I really caved into that style, which sort of led to me, having this, backslide, I guess you would say, from religion and focusing more on the hip hop and the craft. That would lead me into my 12th grade year, where I was really, really focused on producing mixtapes and personifying the street life, even though internally I didn't feel that way anymore. I had actually been softened towards, wanting to live a different type of life. Now, after, like we mentioned before, after, I think the first thing was I was in the studio late one night recording, and I noticed my mother, who was addicted to narcotics, was dozing off quite a bit. And finally, at one point, I wouldn't put my mother in the bed, and I hugged her, she hugged me, and we cried a little bit just because I had seen that she was in a very, very, she was very, very heavily, like, sedated. She was high. And I was on the phone with my wife to be, was my girlfriend at the time. So I remember telling her at that time, I said, I feel like, one of these days she's not going to wake up. So that morning, my mother didn't wake up. She died overdosed. And that was the first thing that made me just like really cave in, and feel lost. I felt very, very, like I didn't have control. When some people lose people that are close to them, what happens is they begin to shut out. They shut out God. For me, I became even more broken and more bitter to some degree. I became more, vulnerable, I guess I would say, spiritually, because I felt like I had less control over my life because my mother was no longer there. So now that that had happened, I would say maybe a year and a half later, I got into this altercation with another rapper who put out this horrible song about me, and that led to a physical confrontation. And then a friend of mine tried to kill him. And so after this kill or be killed situation, I got in because they were going to come after me. They thought I sent somebody to kill them. But after the coast was clear and we squashed everything, I said, there's no way I'm going back to this life. So I went back to Christianity like 10 times stronger than what I was before, right? I really now was really to to give everything, and I didn't know really where I was going. I had no idea what direction I was going to go into. I don't know who your audience is. I can use Jewish terms. I can't use Jewish terms.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So I had no hadracha, nothing. I didn't have a kivun. I wasn't thinking about what was going to be.
Yeah.
All I knew was that I could not go back to the same life that I was in. That was it. That's the only thing I knew. And so I stayed home and I was praying every single day. And at some point, I had this major urge just to pick up the Bible again, and I did. And that's when I started reading. But to that point, I at that point became a Christian and a reborn again, devout, strong Christian, and I at that point was ready to dedicate my life towards that. As I started to study the Bible, I started to see there was this major disconnect because there's this amazing relationship going on between God, Hashem, and the Jewish people. And I'm fascinated more than ever by this now because I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood and I never knew anything about Judaism. For whatever reason, my heart was just ringing towards it. So I decided I was going to read it from cover to cover. And I'm talking about Tanakh. There was no such thing in my head at this point of Torah Sheba'al Peh, of Gemara, anything. I didn't know anything. So I just had Tanakh. And so I'm reading it from cover to cover, and I can't get over the relationship that Hashem has with the Jewish people. That nothing they do they can't go wrong. Even if Hashem expels in the end, all of the Nevi'im are talking about this time of restoration, what God is going to bring back in the Jewish people. So a lot of things became very, very clear for me after reading the Tanakh. And so, long story short, you can ask me more questions. But I started to get very, very inspired towards Judaism, not all the way towards Judaism. The first stop I made was Messianic Judaism. I became like a part of the Jews for Jesus community, something like that. And my wife also came along with me on that journey. In the beginning, she thought I was crazy, but at some point, she realized I really was crazy and decided to join me. And my wife and her sister are very, very close. And my wife's sister was dating my best friend at the time. My friend, since we were in kindergarten, we were really, really close. So we all went on this journey and we started studying, all of us learning. And I started beginning with Bible study groups. And I was doing this in my community at the time. Just as I learned something, I was sharing it with everybody else. Then I really got confused after I started going to this Messianic congregation because there was so much, different things that I was not familiar with. Davening out of Sidurim and everything. Like I had no idea that from a Sefer Torah. I go to this place and this is what they're doing. I didn't walk into a regular Messianic Jews for Jesus place is like a church, really, but used in this place, it was not. It was like a shul. So I had to try to find out as much as I can, information to figure out what it is, these new practices I'm doing. So I ended up on Chabad.org. And that's probably what took me to the next level. The more I did that, I was like really intrigued in Judaism now. So that was, long story short, that was really how that journey came. And then it wasn't until, and we started our process officially. I think I was 22, 21. When I started our actual process of Geirus. At least we started moving in that direction. I think by the time I actually met with Rabbi Benzikin in Seattle to start my conversion, I was 24 at that time.
Why do you become Hasidic? There's so many different sectors, different minhagim, different traditions in the Jewish world. So why made you decide to become Hasidic?
I mean, there was never a time where I was like, objectively like looking at things like, okay, I could do this or become like this. And I know a lot of people who have gone through a Geirus and they consider all these things. I don't think there was ever a time where I was like overly considering about what I am. I'm layers upon layers of a yid. I didn't at any point like drop something. Like I'm Hasidic, but I'm also Sephardi because I'm a guy Sephardi. I just add it on, man. I don't get rid of anything. I'm just packing it all in.
Shabbos table, you can have lachmajin, you can have chalent, you can have all the different types of food.
Some barakas, whatever the case is. I can also have fried chicken and collard greens. Also, I could do it all. So the truth is, what's interesting is that so when we started our conversion, we were just sort of like led towards the Sephardi shul where we were. But at the same time, the first thing that really, I think was inspiring me faith-wise, I know, was the Breslov Sephorim. starting with the books of Rav Arush. So these were the books that were actually, and there were a lot of beautiful rebbeim and people inside the Seattle community that really took us in like family and different things like that. So I had this weird dynamic where the Sephardi community we were in were very tight knit. Everybody was like cousins, and they were all family. And I don't think this was intentional. Very warm place. So that's how we ended up at the Sephardi. It was so warm, and it was whatever. But there weren't a lot of people that would have us over because it was always a very family tight knit. It was like, I always make a joke. It was like a mafia, you understand?
Yeah.
So the people that were having us over all the time were Ashkenazi. So we didn't learn a lot of different minhagim. Anything we had to learn, we had to like look it up or whatever. But we're working with the Sephardi Rav. We're part of the Sephardi Shul. During somewhere in this process, it was actually early on when I initially met him, but when I started getting close to my Rav Brody, Shmuel Brody, he's originally from Silver Spring. He's in Baltimore now, but he was in Seattle for a good amount of time, a long tikuf of his Rabbanus, he was in Seattle. So we started getting very, very close to him, and Rabbi Brody was next level for us because Rabbi Brody reminded us what journey we was on. I mean, when I came into Yiddish, we were on fire for Hashem. You know what I mean? And like I said, I didn't know where I was going. I was fasting 3 days at a time. I was going out praying for hours, and so the moment you come into communion, you're really starting officially come. What do? They tell you you're crazy. They send you to the kollel. Go to the kollel. You're gonna go learn something. You don't find these type of things like that all the time in community. But when I seen Rabbi Brody and we started to get closer to him, he was on fire for Hashem, right? And that started swelling. And we're like, me and my brother-in-law, like, this is what we came for. So we became very close to him. He had sort of started his own breakaway, which started as a minyan, and then they later on became a shul, and that became like our home. And at that point in our life, he had told us also to you don't have to leave being Sephardi. You can also be here. You can be Hasidic, be whatever. And I was really into the Breslov Seforim at the time. Me and my brother-in-law, so I was reading them in addition to Rav Arush. And just as we continued to grow, it was one thing after the other. And every piece of lavusha I had to daven for because my wife thought I was crazy. When I wanted to put on a long jacket, I had to daven. So everything I have on, I earned. Wow. I didn't grow up in a community or whatever. When I want to wear a shtreimel from a down hat to up hat to everything, I had to daven to Hashem that my wife would be with me. So I prayed for everything.
We all want to enhance our Shabbos table. We all want to engage the family, the kids, the adults, everyone around. How do you do that? A lot of times it can be tough and challenging. I'd like to introduce to you to incredible inspiration for your Shabbos table. Parish Knowledge provides an incredible short and sweet Torah thought and an incredible story for your Shabbos table. It's good for kids of all ages. Baruch Hashem, it's inspiring thousands of people from around the world, people from all backgrounds, and Baruch Hashem, their feedback is so great. So if you'd like to get it for free, please email info@parishknowledge.com. Just say, hey, I'd like to subscribe. You can visit the website parishknowledge.com. This will, Bez Shem, change your Shabbos table. It will enhance it, and it will bring great, meaningful inspiration that will help you get through your week. For more information, please see the show notes and enjoy the rest of this episode. So in this interview, many times you speak, you talk about the struggles you had growing up, and these days there are so many children just like the way you were, and they have the same challenges, same situation. Is there anything you're doing to try to help those people for Tikkun Olam? Is there anything you're trying to do to help those people get out of that place and improve their lives?
I mean, I think the biggest thing, I've always thought about, there was a interview that I was privy to see many, many years ago. I didn't see the whole interview. I just seen one clip. And one of these, I don't know how exposed your audience is, but there was something called the Breakfast Club. And there's this guy named Charlemagne the Fraud, I'd call him. He was on talking to one of these white singers, rappers, or whatever the case is. And he was very upset about him call him a culture vulture or whatever. He didn't like this guy. So he asked the guy in the middle of the interview, he says, what are you doing for Black Lives Matter, Difficult thing. You ask a white, rapper what he's doing for the Black Lives Matter community. This is before we knew how fraudulent the Black Lives Matter was. So what he said was, he says, what are you doing for the Black Lives Matter movement? So he didn't really have an answer. I don't think it was a part of his agenda. I don't think he was thinking about what he was doing for the Black Lives Matter movement. But I always said that if he asked me that, what am I doing for Black Lives Matter? I would tell him I'm living a Black life that matters. And I think that we could do is be an example for our community, much more than words or going back. I grew up seeing the difference. And what had the biggest effect on me, I talk about this Christian organization that took me in at that time when I was young. what was most effective about these people were the fact that they didn't come from my neighborhood. Most of the time, when people tried to rehabilitate guys that came from the hood and the streets and they put them back out there, you understand. After a person who's made a very serious life change, like I'm so far away from the way I grew up and who I am. But that took years and years of me being outside of my environment and in a completely different environment. Usually people don't have the opportunity because even if they messed up in life and they went out of their immediate environment, they go to prison or they go some other place where they're exposed to the same thing. So that change is only going to be, predicated upon, whatever the consequence was of why they ended up where they were. But a person that actually makes a change that they get to experience for themselves, it's much easier for a person like that to be able to be effective and to be able to live their life as an example. And the reason why I say that is because for the most part, most of the guys who grew up in my type of environment and they did go on to be mentors, not saying there weren't some people who were great, there were some that were great, but the overwhelming majority of these guys were just, back out there on the streets doing the same thing we were, but they're working for organization, but they're doing all type of, corruption and everything else. But then just like, and in the hood, people talk. So we all know that this guy who's, seeming like they're coming to help us out here while we're here in the streets, they're just doing the same thing, So I think one of the most powerful things that I could do for the inner city community that I was a part is actually expose my life to the world, that I've actually changed. I am a symbol of change. In addition to that, yes, every opportunity that I have, I go back to high schools, I talk to people. I will be honest, they're very, very hard for me to do that. I don't have a lot of secular subjects to talk to people about, and God's not so popular in public schools.
Right.
But the real truth is that as much as I can help out, I talk on people with panels. I was just on a Black panel with a lot of other people the other day. So I do as much as I can, but I think the main focus is living my life.
You were a kid and teenager, you were a hip hop artist, you were a rapper. When you became Jewish, did you want to continue and pursue that career?
No, I actually retired. I thought I retired. I retired in 2009. I think, well, officially that was my last album. And the reason why I did that album was just because I felt it was very wrong to abruptly leave, company I built up with a good friend of mine who was my business partner, my manager at the time. And but I wanted the last album that I had to be something that was positive, uplifting. Even at that point, that was like still messianic. I started that album, I was a part of the messianic movement. By the time I finished, I was already starting my Geras. So so it was a very interesting time for me in terms of life. However, in my head, that was the last time I was going to, be putting out an album, and I really thought that I was leaving everything. And you have to understand, and this is very important for me to say it this way. I was on a rampage in my life, growing spiritually, but the rampage was I was eliminating everything in my life that felt like it was interrupting my relationship with Hashem. Anything that felt like it was competing on any level. So, friends, didn't talk to him. Family, didn't talk to him. My Xbox, I sold it. John Madden was taking way too much time in my life. Whatever it is. Football, music. I remember the day I took my whole, I had like a big card of all my CDs and whatever. And I remember the day I went and threw them into the dumpster.
Wow.
Anything that felt that it was competing with my relationship with Hashem, I got rid of it. And this is at that point, I didn't know I was going to become a Yid or anything like that. So the closer and closer I got to realizing that, and I'm starting to read books like Nissim Black. I'm reading, like I said, some of the Breslov Reform, and the idea of anivus, of humility and meekness, was in complete contrast to rap, which on its best day, I'm talking about the most positive rap that you can find. Like most people ask me today about this NF kid. NF is a positive rapper. He doesn't curse or anything like that. But I'm saying this is like probably the best you're going to get on a mainstream level. At the least, he raps about how much better he is than other rappers, right? You understand what I'm saying? So talking about Ball Gaiva bar none. Everybody at least is going to be talking about some type of Gaividic something in rap. That's just what it is. At the minimum, I'm talking about the most positive guy. At least he's rapping about how much better he is than the next person.
So that type of music, what's your message to a Jew listening to that type of person? What's the power of Jewish music and the negative effects of listening to that?
Okay, so I'll tell you this. It's not about the power of Jewish music, it's the power of the person who's giving over the music. You understand what I'm saying? And that's what Rabbi Nachman talks about in Torah Gimel. And this is what changed my life. The reason why I'm using him as an example is because every Jewish kid who's not listening to, they're trying to wing themselves off and whatever, and listen to this guy. And he could be a great guy. I don't know anything about him. All I can tell you is that when you're listening to music, you have about 2 or 3 minutes. Today's song's about what? Average 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes or whatever, where that person that you're listening to has mind control over you. Really does. It alters your emotions. It alters the way that you're thinking. And alters, some people say, "Oh, I'm just listening to the beat." No, you're listening to much more than a beat. And the brain is capturing way more than what a person. Just like when you look at an image, there's several things that's going on inside of there, and the brain processed all of those things, and they can affect the person's mood. It can affect the way that the person actually goes about life. So the truth is, with these type of things, I'm not as humble as other people. Just like, "Oh, you need to just run." And the reason why I'm that way is because when I came to it, nobody had to tell me anything. Most of the time when people listen to things like that, they're not in a place where they could depart from that world because it's got too much of a hold. That klipa has too much of a hold on them. So for me personally, I tell people to really focus on building your relationship with Hashem, because most people, by the time we're having that conversation, they're already ready to get away from it. They already start to realize that this is not really the best thing for me. So the best thing is that more and more that Hashem takes precedence in your life, you're not going to want it. That's the problem. Is that person is to get themselves to a place to where I don't want these things. I don't want to listen to things that are not, I was in a yeshiva in Manchester about, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, something like that. And I remember going there to go speak. And there was one boy who came up to me after the shir, and he was telling me whatever. We pulled me to the side, and tell me like, he's having a very, very tough time with the shir and trying to, get himself in a place where he actually be motivated to come and learn. And I don't know why. If it's all siyata d'shmaya, I just, at the moment, what popped in my head, ask him what he's listening to in his iPod. The iPods were still around at that time. So I asked him what he's listening to. And so as he tell me, Eminem, Dr. Dre, 50 Cent, or whatever. And I said, you realize that if you're listening to these guys, you're not going to have any motivation to come in and come learn Torah. Like, it's just, these are contradictory messages. Right. Once you fill yourself up with that, and it's not about, that's just something that's bad, right? If I'm just telling you this about that music and people that are that's just bad, let's go to anything parv. Anything parv, anything in your life that is in your life that you enjoy, any hobby, and you'll say that it's not wrong, it's kosher. We'll say it's kasher. This is okay. The more and more time you give to that, right, as the less and less time you're devoting to your devotions and to your avodas Hashem, it's going to take over your life, and it's going to damage your emunah. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if you like throwing, spitballs at the wall all day. I don't care what it is. Anything that a person does that is not increasing their level of devekus and connection to Hashem is for sure, at the minimum, it's going to damage a person's emunah. Why? Why do I say that? How will it damage? Because you have faith in people, and you have trust in people that you know well. People that you don't know well, you don't have faith and trust in them. And how do you know well people? How do you know people? It's the more time you spend with them. The more time you spend around people, you know either to trust them. Some people you know not to trust because you spent a lot of time with them, right? So, and you can at least trust your instinct not to trust the person. So, but the more trust and emunah that a person has Hashem comes about as a result of spending more time with him. Take that with things that are just parv, but things that are connected, that are anti, that for sure is going to have a damaging effect on a person's relationship. I'm saying regular hobbies. I'm not saying you shouldn't have them. God forbid. What I'm saying by that is I'm saying that the more and more time that we devote to anything that is not in avodas Hashem, is the more and more we're at risk of having more ahava or more something. We, the I think it's in the Steve Shalom talked about this in the introduction of Amuna, talked about that all of the midos a person already has inside of themselves, right? So a person has a certain amount of ahava, he has a certain amount of bitachon or whatever the case is, or characteristics and manifestation of the midos, not exactly the midos, but where the person places those things, like a person can have, bitachon in his paycheck and in his boss, or he can have it in a shim, and whichever way, he's got to measure it out, how much he has over here, how much he has over here. So when I'm talking about something that's parv, that whatever it is that is not increasing the avodas Hashem, anything that it is that you're giving more and more. I'm not saying not to have, please do not say that Nissim said not to have hobbies, not to have things to free your mind and your brain and to whatever the case is, But what I am saying is that, like Rav Nassim the Breslov says, he says, eat, drink, sleep, but watch the clock. How much time am I devoting towards these things, as opposed to me? And just because the more time I give Hashem, the more amun I'm going to have, the stronger my relationship is going to be with Him, the more bitachon I'm going to have.
But you still have to eat, you still have to sleep, obviously, right? I mean, I believe the Sharm says that if you do something for Hashem, for your ruchnius, even if it's kashmir, like let's say you're eating, so you have to, because you have to eat. But if you do it for the right reasons, for the right intentions, that becomes avodas Hashem too. That becomes ruchnius.
It's also avodas Hashem, 1,000%.
So if you enjoy playing music, let's say, and that helps you connect to Hashem, obviously within the right amount, let's say, then that also could be avodas Hashem, right?
1,000%. So for me though, because but that's why it takes a person checking in with himself, because you have to know. For me, I realized for myself, right, that music was inhibiting my relationship with Hashem, because of my passion and my love for it. Was first place in my life. It was the most important thing in my life. That if, like Avraham Avinu, if he wasn't willing to sacrifice Yitzchak, you know what I'm saying? How would he have known? Hashem says, now I know that you're a mami, that you're mamish, the Rosh Maminim is Avraham Avinu, right? Because he was willing to give up everything for Hashem. So sometimes we have things in our life, like I said, they're not bad, right? Music turned out to not be bad. I came back to it, but the truth is that my relationship to it was not right. So that time that I took away from it was everything I needed in order for me to reset that relationship, so it can have its proper place inside of my life, right? Amazing. So if not, sometimes our hobbies and the things that we love becomes conflated, and then Hashem takes the back burner.
This Hanukkah is a perfect time to gift someone with the Aryeh Mishnah Berurah. Even get it for yourself. You'll love it. It'll transform your way of learning. If you never learned Mishnah Berurah yet, then you'll for sure love it. It's easy to read, Hebrew-English translation, incredible pictures. You could get the Sfarim, you get the books at your local bookstore. You can also visit the website, ar-ilam.org. For more information, please see the show notes. And be sure to stay to the end for a special sneak peek. And enjoy the rest of this week's episode.
How do you get into the Jewish music world, the Jewish music scene?
So I got into the Jewish music scene. Really, I think Hashem Melech was the first thing. When I returned back to music, I was very scared, because I didn't know. I was like, it was very, very tough for me. Not that I worried about I didn't worry. I tell you what I wasn't scared of. I wasn't scared of people. I wasn't scared of how communities would take me. I wasn't scared about how Rabbanim were I didn't care about any of that. What I was scared about was I going to lose my relationship with Hashem? That was the only thing I was worried about. I didn't have any community pressures. I wasn't worried about shidduchim, but Hashem, I was already, I had none of these issues that most people think about when they're starting their music career as a Reform Yid, right? I was only thinking about one thing. It's like, Hashem, is this going to draw me away from you, if I put myself all into this? So that was, my initial nervousness. And I even say, still, to me, just knowing about how hard I push things and how hard I work in this now, that prior to Shem Alech, I was really tiptoeing. I was really kind of tiptoeing. I wasn't 100% sure all the time, like, should I be doing, should I not be doing? Like, I was sure I was supposed to be doing it, but I wasn't sure if the way I was going about it was the right way. So, and I didn't really know how, and I didn't have direction. And I was diving to Hashem for a lot, and he sent God my way. I mean, God sent God my way. And we ended up doing Hashem Elech, and that was the beginning of me realizing, okay, Hashem, this is what you're saying. This is it. And it was an important part and bookmark in my life and in my career, even till today. Not just because people stream the song a lot and it's like became a Jewish hit and it was an instant classic, as everybody tells me. What it was for me was it was a staple of me realizing Hashem saying, this is how to do it. Because I was very not confused. First thing I did when I came back to music is I went back to my, my non-Jewish manager, non-Jewish team, non-Jewish PR person. Maybe some of these guys were hidden, but nobody was from, you know what I'm saying? I was back into my old thing, and trying to figure out how to do all this, be positive, and to the positive part was easy because that's just where I was in my life, but it was sort of like, how do I promote positivity in this world? And I was really getting that back from PR people and vlogs and everything else and blogs online, just like, man, this stuff's too positive. I don't know what to do with this. Like, and so me exploding with God, doing a Shem Melech 2.0 was really a bookmark for me. That was like, discoveries a year later. Before I started my most recent album, Glory, Hashem made such a gilui for me. Like, because over the years, I released, that's why people like such a wide range. Yeah, I got Motherland Bounce. I got this record. I got Best Friends. I got, Away From Here. I got so many different ranges of records, but as strong as I am as a person, meaning that I am a person that you could see easily from just the story I told you and from my life. I have no problem with going, in the Derech of Avraham Avinu. It's just me and Hashem, and the rest of the world's over there. I have no problem with doing it. However, what we fail to take into account is that, a lot of times when you expand your circle some, then there's a lot of people in your circle who don't necessarily have bad intentions, but they don't have your best intentions, right? They don't have the best interest for you, They have the best interest for you, for them. And it's totally valid that that's the way that they can see your life. During that whole entire time of me releasing things like Motherland Bounce, which I'm not so happy about the song, but the song's a banger. I'm not gonna lie. The song bounces. Like, I'm lying if I didn't say that, right? So I'm not gonna lie about that part. But what makes me feel the stain is that I wasn't positive about putting that record out. Everybody else around me was positive, but I wasn't positive about putting that record out. I wasn't even positive about making it. But by the time I put it out, I was like, what can I do, right? So I put out this record and I go real hard on it, and everybody else around me is like, the best wishes. Yeah, that's the type of music which you should have been doing in the whole time. And I'm just like, but it's not just, I'm not there anymore. You know what I'm saying? And I was telling, and shout out to him, but L'chaim OG, that's my guy. But he's more, that's more of his speed, and he really, and he encouraged me during that time, but that's, for him, that's so authentic to him. That's just not who I was anymore at that time.
So why do you put out that song if you were so into it?
So there were so many different factors. One, there was my kids weren't being let into school because they were black, and I'm in Israel. Wow. There's no peace. There's no politically correctness at all. So nobody was telling me, oh, it's just because, we're fooled right now. Maybe I got one or two of those, but shout out to Rebbetzin Berkowitz, who mamish with us to almost every single meeting. She left sometimes crying with some of the things that she heard inside of these meetings. So we were rejected from a lot of schools, and this is a small stain even. I don't feel like I didn't come to this crazy place, but at the time we were feeling very, very dejected. At the time I went to Rav Chaim. Rav Chaim, it was the famous story of me going to Rav Chaim, him saying that your color is your Maila, not your Chisaron. That became public news. This is what happened, which I'm putting it out there. I got called by the radio unannounced, and they asked me, it was Menachem Toker, God bless him, but I just released a new song, King of the World, at that time. So I thought he was calling me about the new song. So we hop on the phone, we start talking, and he starts asking me about, why did Reb Chaim say that? It was on Yeshiva World News, doing that. And I was like, oh, so I started to tell him the story, what happened. And he starts blowing up on the phone. If you listen to the interview, like, I start to pull back, as I start to feel his energy, that this is getting way too big. And the next thing you know, it was like all over the media. And that was the shimiach. It's the last thing I want, because, and I'm telling you this, and I'm not pandering, I'm a real guy. I'm just being honest. I'm a real guy. And the amount that Yidden have took me in and accepted me for, and it was weird. You have to understand that for most of us who come, at least from where I came from, the hood, wherever we come from a place where we're crabs in a pot. Everybody's trying to pull down the next person. The amount of chesed that I've experienced in my life, for this to be my story on the world stage, you know what I'm saying? That my kids not getting into school because they're black, like that sums up any amount of my Yiddishkeit. Nothing. It's like a little small speck. Baruch Hashem, we moved to Beit Shemesh, and I didn't need Rebbetzin and Berkowitz. I didn't need anybody, you know. Baruch Hashem, we just went. So it was like we became so like. I remember my wife at the time, just like it was so hard for us. And then I talked to Rav Weinberger. He probably gave me the best advice. He said, "Listen, the news is moving. Everybody wants a news story. So just be quiet for 2 weeks. Don't say anything. It'll go away, And we went through that time. I just signed. I was being pushed by good friends of mine, and I talked to a few tzaddikim at the time in Yerushalayim about doing more outreach to the black community. Everybody was telling me that I was being heavily encouraged, even from my Rav Rosh, to go bigger, go out to the world. Don't be stuck over here. You could be an Orla Goyim and ever. So I interpreted it the way I interpreted it, right? So I understood the lushan and the jargon of being able to speak to that wider audience is not in the same way that I'm going to speak to boys at the Mir Yeshiva. It's going to be a different lushan. So at that time, I was working very, very close with Zachariah L'chaim G, and he was actually managing me at that time. So when we had originally heard, a few records or whatever, and he was listening to him, and he heard that Motherland Bounce, and I start freestyling to it. And then he was like, we got to do this. So one day I was in the studio, and I kept avoiding it. I wasn't going to do the song. And then we was in the studio one day in Yerushalayim, and he came in, and he's like, bro, you got to do that song, like the one. So everybody who loves it, you could thank L'chaim OG. And I have no salt on him at all, but Klal, I'm not upset, whatever. In the end, I'm happy that the record came out, even if it's not my favorite, and I probably avoid performing it when I want to. But it's nothing against him or anything like that. But it was just that record in my time, that time for me was coming from that frustration of what I was experiencing. That on top of the fact that every time I came to New York, it was like every time I was running into black people in the black guys. Some of them were Hebrew Israelites, some were all that. But I was being called a traitor because I dress Ashkenazi. So now I'm not black enough. Over here, I'm not Jewish enough. So whatever. So that's how Motherland Bounce came out. And because I don't like to write music from that place. And so that's my biggest frustration. Like, right. I don't like making music from these type of places. So that was probably, that's the best way I can explain it. But it doesn't change the fact the song goes hard. You put it on, it's just, it's just one of those songs. And it opened me up in that way. The problem is that because of where my heart is, and because of how I like to create, and because of my taste in music, it was impossible for me to keep servicing, the wider audience that I got from that song. It's impossible for me to keep servicing it because it's already not my place to stay musically in one place like that for so long. But in general, just for me to keep reservicing, that audience of which came from an expanded, I don't have the capacity for it because this is not my place of where I am. So that was that. I forget what the original question was, but that's me going off a tangent with the music. But I'm saying, but this was my nakuda. My nakuda was that even for a person as strong as me, that I can, Hashem's voice can get so small and so quiet that you don't have that hadrach anymore and you're hearing everybody else around you. And it wasn't just Z, it was other people. That wasn't Z's idea to put it out. The label, when I went to the label, they're like, man, this is the song we're putting out, right? So that was the way everything went. And at that point, I didn't have a say. I didn't have a say in how the video went. Only thing that happened in that video, I fought so hard. The African dancers, I remember when we first originally shot that, these guys were oiled up with no shirts on. I had to fight for no women to be inside the video. This is when I'm saying, when you start to get on these major record labels and bigger companies that expand, it's very, very hard to keep your emes and your truth because everybody, and I had to fight, and then I had to go back and refilm the whole entire thing with the guys with shirts on, like the amount of nisyonos that I had to go through with that. And it's just sort of like, man, I'd rather just be far away from it. You know what I'm saying? It's not even a place for me. And what happens? I'm going to tell you, this is the craziest thing. And this is why I go back to why Hashem Elech was such a staple for me, for Hashem, for people to understand where I'm coming from with this. The difference about that song as opposed to the records that I did, preceding Hashem Elech, then when I had finally come back to music, was, what else am I gonna rap about? So it was the praise Hashem, Berabim b'Hesia. It was very public. It was a very open thing. Everybody always was telling me, oh, if you just talk God a little bit like this, then you can, and that may work for, Ben Shapiro on his podcast. He probably doesn't have to talk about God too much, and he's going to bring a lot of people to tshuva because he's got a yarmulke on. But me, Hashem put Nissim Black into the world to tell the world that Hashem is here. Hashem exists. You understand what I'm saying? But for Hesia, the whole world's supposed to know. That's why my neshama was put here, and that's why that song took off and hit number 3 on the world charts the way that it did, because that's when I was in my place. Anytime I'm not in my place and I'm trying to do it another way, some type of agony comes out. Now, people will argue Motherland Bounce for viral. First off, there's the labels. They know how to make things go viral. And not to say it wasn't a great video and different things like that, but they know how to make things go viral. I put out Adored a few years after that, which I got back to like making my own thing. I followed up. I think I did Higher, I did Change, and then I hit it. I did Adored. And by the time I put out that song, I had such a mass amount of non-Jews starting to come to my concerts and starting to follow me, and they were listening to the music I wanted to make in the first place. You understand?
Wow,
and so it's such a crazy thing, and I can openly speak about Hashem and not feel any type of way about it. You understand? Because I'm servicing my audience. So it's a very important lesson, not only for people in general, but for young Jewish musicians.
Miami Boys Choir, like just 2 years ago or something, song Yerushalayim from a while ago just blew up. There's not one English word in that song.
Exactly. So people have to believe in the power of Hashem. If Hashem wants, he wants.
Who is the happiest person that you know?
That's a very good question. I was gonna say my Rav Arush. It's the only happy person I know like that smiling rain, sleet, hail, snow. He's always got a smile on his face. But he's probably the happiest person that I know. That I can think of.
Where were you on October 7th?
October 7th, I was here in Israel. I was in shul first. Before I left the shul, I went to the bomb shelter because the sirens had already went off before I left the shul. But this is Israel, so we go to shul anyway. So by the time I got to shul, we're down for a little bit, and more sirens. Then we took cover. Then we came back out. Then there were more sirens, and then it came out. The difference was that we actually heard boom. We heard action. Prior to that, I've heard sirens before, but I never heard like actual, And then maybe after the third time, we just stopped going. We danced the whole entire way. We heard sirens. We didn't know what was going on. But and then only after the Chag we found out what happened.
Hopefully, we'll see Yeshua's very soon.
Oh man, this is what we signed up for. I said, at least me, I signed up for it. You guys had to say yes in a different lifetime. I said yes in this lifetime. So, Baruch Hashem, I have front row tickets. I'm here in Eretz Kodesh. Get front row tickets to the Geula, Bezat Hashem. Get yours now because it's underway. Listen, let me tell you this. This is the most important thing, and this is one of the biggest things that drew me to Judaism. And this is why I've always said this, the entire existence of Hashem is predicated on the Jewish people. Not that Hashem needs us to exist. Not that, I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying something that's like apikos. What I'm saying to you is that Hashem himself, his business card to the rest of the world is that there's Jewish people. If you look inside the Nevi'im, we're so busy all the time with the Gemara that we're not really paying attention. The Nevi'im are saying it over and over again. Hashem, how will I be sanctified in the eyes of the nations? Is when you see that there's Jews. When they survive everything that's going to happen to them in the future, in the Atid. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's very clear. You look at Yechezkel, you look at Yirmiyahu, you look at Zechariah, you see everything that's supposed to happen that talks about the Atid, the time of the future. Yidden survive. And what makes that, how you know it's a divine, is because everybody knows we shouldn't have. It's not mathematically not possible that there should be Yidden today, but there are Yidden today, even smaller numbers. But guess what? Who else called that? Hashem called that also. How small. Either way it goes, the prediction is amazing. Even if you want to predict that there's still Jews, that's an impressive thing, because there shouldn't be Jews based upon the amount of trauma and traumatic things that happen to the Jewish people. If you're going to say that there should be a lot of Jews because of how many Jews there were at one point in history, and we should have been able to reproduce. The same Hashem also said it will be small in numbers also too. It's an amazing thing to be able to see Hashem like mamash up until this point and have the amount of influence to be able to show us systematically. And if a person pays attention to the Nevi'im and they're looking at all of the books that talk about what happened at the end, we're standing right there. Many years, I know everybody's been saying, oh no, we're at the end for a long time or whatever, but the Simanim, we have to look inside to see what it has to be. Listen, Gog and Magog couldn't have been World War II. Why? Because it says that they're already in Eretz Yisrael. We had to be already in Eretz Yisrael. When the fighting starts in Yechezkel, it says it very perfectly. They're dwelling inside of the land. Why? They just got back to the land. It says all of that we just got here. So it's an amazing time to be in, Baruch Hashem, and we should be zocheh to see Yeshua and see Mashiach. B'meir v'yameinu.
So what's coming new with Nissim Black?
Yeah, lot of new updates. I mean, usually, the album is out, Glory. So please, everybody, go music that is mamash from the heart. These are hours and hours of his bodilus, of crying to Hashem, written in song format on the album Glory. In addition to that, I'm following up my whiskey, my Hava whiskey that I had before. We're revamping, so the Hava is coming back. And in addition to that, that's for all the kiddish clubs there. And then and then you're gonna see now from us a brand new form. It started a media production company, so it's gonna be a lot more content of Hasidic and powerful stories and different things like that to try to awaken something in the heart of a yid to bring it back close to Hashem, the world.
Nissim, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Nissim Black. Hope you got inspiration from it and his incredible, powerful story and journey. And of course, the things we've discussed, including music and the influence it has on you as a person and your life. Coming next week, Be'ez Hashem, before Zayis Chanukah, we have incredible, powerful interview coming out. A crazy story featuring someone that you probably know. I'll give you a hint what it's about. I'll give you a hint. Zayis Chanukah, a few years ago. Stay tuned. Follow and subscribe for more. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please rate us 5 stars or give us a review. If you're listening on YouTube, please, of course, subscribe and comment. Please share this with friends and family. We're available on Torah Anytime, all main streaming platforms. If you'd like to donate, please reach out to us. You could also call 646-397-2320. If you want to join our new WhatsApp group, you could click on the link in the show notes, or you can message 646-397-2320. We have some more incredible stuff coming out soon, so stay tuned. Follow, subscribe. You'll get notified right when you put it out. Have a freilich and Hanukkah. This Hanukkah inspires someone else. This Hanukkah is all about sharing the light, sharing the warmth, sharing the love. One small flame, one small candle could light up so many other candles. If I have one small candle, I could light up thousands of other candles. Why? Because it's that small flame, and the fire spreads. Same as with you. You could inspire others. You could motivate and transform others' lives. Just like a fire, one person could light up thousands of others' lives. That's our calling on Hanukkah. So this Hanukkah, let's go out there. Let's inspire people. Let's ignite the fire in them. Let's ignite the spark in them. And have a freilich Hanukkah. Thank you for listening.